Generative Answers in Copilot Studio allows you to connect to your website, SharePoint, upload documents, custom data sources, all of these things, and have an instant AI-based chat Copilot. And the way that it's written in the documentation, it's easy and awesome. But what I've found in the comments, and I've been playing around with this, is that sometimes the experience is a bit meh. So I'm going to take you through how to get the most out of this so that you can get back to that much more happy place with it, because you really can. So first up, why Generative Answers? Why would you even use this? When you're creating a Copilot or a chatbot, traditionally we used to have to build out topics. Here's a particular topic. If people put in these particular key phrases or trigger phrases, then we want to go down this conversational path. And we absolutely can still do that. But when you do that, chances are you're really only aware of maybe the top 10, 20, 30% of questions that your users might be asking. And then you've got a long tail. So our walrus here is very smug on the top, knowing all of the things that the users are going to want to ask. But there's depths below that he doesn't know about, and this is where Generative Answers can come in, because you can point it to all of these other different data sources and have the AI find the answers, rather than having to author topics for things that are not those core things that the walrus wants to be in control of. So how this works is, at the moment, it is working with the GPT 3.5 Turbo large language model. This is an OpenAI foundational model. So the starting point is that you're just using a generic model. It's not specifically trained on your organization's data, and it is hosted on an internal Azure OpenAI service. So that means that this stuff is included in the license that you pay for Copilot Studio, which is US about $200 per month per tenant as a starting point. So the things that I'm showing you here are all included in that license. If you start to get into plugging into your own Azure AI or custom sources, that's a whole other different thing, but we're not going to go there just yet. So what we've got here is all of this is contained. The language model is in there. You're not choosing it. It's hosted, included in that service, and you're not having to set any of that up. So that's the really easy starting point for you. We're using a concept here called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. What that means is that you're not training a whole language model on your data, rather you are augmenting it, supplementing it with that business data. So by pointing it to your public website or your SharePoint site, or by uploading documents, you are grounding. I do love this expression, grounding a Copilot. I'm amused by that every single time. But you are grounding the experience in that data. So this is a way of making a custom Copilot without actually having to do custom work. You don't have to go away and train a model yourself, which honestly is very, very resource heavy and intensive. So you don't want to do that unless you've got a lot of expertise and a lot of budget for the whole thing. This is a really good way to get that in the context of your organization's information very quickly and very cheaply. It will actually pick up the context, and we'll have a look at this a little bit later because some of this is a little bit limited, but it knows as the user is chatting, it knows the last 10 turns in the conversation for context. And if you've got multiple sources, so if you're pointing to both a website and a SharePoint repository and a couple of uploaded documents, it's actually going to pull the top 3 answers from each of them, feed all of that stuff back into the model for it to bring that output back into the system. So the way this works is that inside Copilot Studio, there is something called a conversation boosting topic. When you toggle on that says you want to use Generative Answers, this conversation boosting topic is created. And there are 2 ways that you can use this inside your Copilot. The first way is to use it as what's called a fallback topic. In other words, if the chatbot, the Copilot, doesn't understand what the user is asking for, just use the Generative Answers. Traditionally, in a Copilot or chatbot, the fallback would be speak to an agent or something like that. So what this is doing is allowing you to use that AI. So if we think back to our walrus before, where we've got him on top knowing, the top 20% of the answers that we want, this can be your iceberg underneath. This can be everything else. Or you might not even need the walrus at all. You can actually just build a chatbot using this with no predefined topics and just say, my chatbot, my Copilot is whatever is on the website and the users just go ahead and ask it, or you can mix it up and say, I'm going to specify these particular topics and then this is my fallback. You can also, within this, use the generative answers inside a particular topic. So if you have one of those core topics that you are actually saying, here is the user's intent. We've got an example here of something looking at university course information. If this is something to do with the international relations course, we want generative answers pointed to, say, this specific document or this specific part of the website. So you can actually use it both in the scope of a single topic or as a fallback if it doesn't find a topic, or just as the whole Copilot, as you like. Now, there are some limitations with this, and if these limitations are too limiting for you, then there are other more advanced tools which will cost you more and take you more to set up, of plugging into Azure OpenAI, connecting to custom data sources. But within the scope of what we're doing here, you can actually do quite a lot. So you are able to work with public websites. Your starting point needs to be really a top-level domain, and we'll have a look at the implications of that. You can't set it up to point to a website that's multiple levels down. However, if your top-level domain is in that good hierarchy, it will get there. So we'll take a look of that. And then you have a maximum of 4 sites that you can point to. Documents, you can upload documents. I think this is really quite limited. We'll take a look at why in a moment, but if you've got documents up to 3 meg, that's probably the biggest limitation of this. You can upload those. What this is doing is using Dataverse search to index the documents to help you find context in there, and then it will return the results, but we'll see it can't actually provide a link to the document itself. Much better if you want to work with documents is to have them on SharePoint or OneDrive, because you actually get a much better experience. You've got those same limitations there of 3 megabytes per file. You can only list 4 SharePoint sites, but the bigger limitation here is that this needs to be internal. So this won't work if you're creating a Copilot for external use, but if you're doing, and I think a lot of this honestly is internal use cases, you need your employees to have access to your knowledge that's stored on SharePoint of some kind, then you're going to get a much better result using SharePoint than you are with the document uploads. So I'm going to take you through each of these in turn and sort of show you what the experience is and how you can get the most out of it. So the first example here that we're going to look at is the public data on a website. So I have started here with a website that is local where I am in Australia. This is called the Better Health Channel, and I've pointed to a website here that has a lot of information about various health concerns that people might have. So this is pointed just straight out of the box here. All I've done is gone in and say, here is my Copilot, point it to that website, and off we go with answers. I didn't create any topics, didn't do anything, and then it comes back with those things. And you'll see we've actually got a link in here, and that is a link directly to the website, and that's the website content where it's coming from. Now, I mentioned earlier that the URL needs to be not more than 2 levels deep. So when I've created this bot, I've just put in betterhealth.vic.gov.au. That's it. But it's found the results 1, 2, 3 levels down. And I've seen examples where it's gone further than that. So it is actually able to kind of go further down in there and retrieve those results. What you can do though, this is more than just being able to sort of search and retrieve, because the typical thing, you go in, you ask it a question, but this is generative AI. You can actually ask it to generate that content in a different way. So you can switch from here into then saying, please explain it to a child. And now we've got a different answer. Again, noting all the way, this is always giving you those references back in there so that you can see what's going on. Now, there's another option within here called content moderation, where you can set the content moderation to high, medium, or low. The example I used before, I had it on high. High content moderation is set to give you much more accurate answers. Certainly for anything like this, where you're looking for university course information or health information, most business scenarios, I think you're going to be better served by that. Low content moderation is going to give you more creative, less accurate answers. So depending on your scenario, you can play around with that here. I actually tested this out on this information, set it to low, made absolutely zero difference. So I think if you're working with less well-structured sources of information, this might make a difference. If you're pointing to social media or conversation chat forum type things, you might get something different here and you might want to play around with that. But for these much more sort of structured article-based type facts, I found it doesn't really make much of a difference. Now, one of the biggest problems I find that people have when they first come in to start using this is this error here. I'm sorry, I can't help with that. Let's take a look at an example here. Hello, I'm a university bot. How many years is the Bachelor of International Relations? I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to help with that. Can you try rephrasing? So there are a few reasons why this can happen. The first one, if you've only just created your bot, I know we get all overexcited. We go in and create the bot, put in the website, it doesn't work straight away. Just give it a few minutes. Go have a beverage of choice, as I often say, come back, and then you will find this working. So first thing, just give it a few minutes. If you're still getting a 0 answer, then these are the other reasons why that could be happening. The first thing is, and this is the example I'm about to show you, that there are no results. The data source just doesn't contain the answer. Then remember, so this is not just connected to the whole of the web. This is a foundational model connected to your data. It's not just going rogue and finding everything. It can be filtered. So remember, this is based on Azure OpenAI. If you're asking it something rude, I'm not going to swear because this is YouTube and I'm not going to get myself in trouble with this video, but if you're asking inappropriate questions of your Copilot, you could get that answer as well. And then it can also be filtered by that content moderation. So where we looked at that one previously for high, medium, low, then if you've got it set to high, it's very alert to not giving you random made up answers, which is a limitation of generative AI. Some of the more recent models are much better with that. So that's another reason for it as well. Generally speaking, unless you know you're doing something on the edge of inappropriate content, it's going to be either that you're just too quick with setting up your bot and you haven't given it a few minutes to process itself, or that there are no results. And that's the example of what's going on here. So this is a local university in Australia here, where I've just put in the top level domain and I've asked it about a certain course. But when I actually go into the university website, so you'll see the domain, the website I've put in here, anu.edu.au. When I find the information about the course, look at this, programs and courses.anu.edu.au. It's actually a different top level domain. That's why it's not finding it. So depending on how your website is structured, this is one of these things that you're going to need to be aware of. You can add up to 4, so you'll see the difference here. I've now added that one in, and bingo, now I've got my answers. So if your website is structured in a way that you've got a lot of those top level domains and nothing over it, this probably isn't going to work for you. But if you can add up to 4 or point it to those things, so just be aware of that. If you're getting 0 results, that might be one of the things that's going on. So the next thing we can do here is upload documents. This one is kind of cool, also quite limited. So the idea here is that I'm just going to take a document. So I'm working now with a series of policy documents, and this is a very typical HR type scenario. I've got the leave policy, the grievance policy, the performance management, all of those kinds of things sitting in here. So what I've come in here and said, how much parental leave can I take? And this is coming back with that answer. But what I've done here is I haven't pointed this to anything. I've just uploaded this document into my Copilot, and it's able to give me the answer. The thing here is giving you the citations, so you can see that we've got those in there, and it just says citation 1, and if I click on citation 1, I get this experience, which isn't awesome. If you're a user, this is actually the right information. It's a Word document that I've uploaded, but you've lost all your formatting, you've lost everything in there. So this is quite good if you just want to get the facts and get the answers. It's actually really good if you want to be able to just very quickly upload a document, but then if you want to maintain your Copilot, you're going to have to upload updates to that document and change it. To be honest, I'm struggling to see good use cases for this. I think the best use case of this is that it's simple and easy and doesn't need any authentication. As we have a look at the SharePoint example, you are sort of working with a use case where you need authentication, but the experience is much better from the user point of view. So if this is a use case you've got an idea for, let me know in the comments here. I think this is one of these ones where it is just sort of quick and easy. It's fun to play with. I'm less inclined to feel like I would be using this one in real life. So let's take a look at SharePoint and OneDrive. If you're getting value out of this video, please give me a like on the video. It certainly helps it reach other people, and subscribe to the channel. I'm doing heaps more on Copilot Studio. So SharePoint or OneDrive, this is a much better experience. And what I've done here for comparison is exactly the same thing. I've uploaded exactly the same documents, but this time I've put them in and I've pointed them to a SharePoint site document library in SharePoint rather than just uploading the documents into the Copilot. So this is giving me the same answer. How much parental leave can I take? And you'll see that we've got all of that sitting in there. And then it's actually listing the leave policy document, but the difference here is that that's a link to the document. Now again, this is the document on SharePoint. This is my test, so I'm not showing any authentication here, but if you actually publish and use this bot, the user would have to do that authentication to prove who they are, and then they're only getting access to what they have access to in SharePoint. Leaving that aside, the experience here is that I can click on that leave policy, and now that's going to take me directly into that document. That is such a better user experience than what we've got with the previous one where it just had a chunk of text on the screen. So if your use case works for that internal validation, then I think, or authentication, I think this is certainly a far superior experience than just uploading the documents. Now there is another experience in here. If you are using the Copilot for Microsoft 365, that's the paid license where you're paying $30 per user per month, and you've got Copilot working across Teams and Outlook and Word and PowerPoint, all of those kinds of things, then you will likely have going on in the background something called Microsoft 365 semantic search. That is something that is actually working to give you a better indexing experience and a better search experience for all of those Copilot experiences. This is a screenshot I've taken from a video. I'll put the link in the description here from the fabulous guys at Microsoft Mechanics explaining what this is and how it all works. So if you've got that going for you, you will find you're probably getting even better results from your SharePoint search in here. So if you've got the combination of the the Copilot for Microsoft 365 license and Copilot Studio, you're going to get the best of both worlds. As I said, screenshot from another video here. All of the things I'm showing here, I don't have the full Copilot for Microsoft 365 license enabled. I've just got the Copilot Studio. I'm actually working in a trial to do this, but if you're just buying that outright, even without the full Copilot for Microsoft 365, you could do it. But there is some kind of benefit in the connection in there. Now, one of the absolutely key ways that you can have a better experience with generative answers is to use this piece here called custom instructions. If you've done anything else much with ChatGPT or AI, you might have come across this concept before. This is all about saying that you are essentially giving a meta prompt to your Copilot to say, you are acting as an HR assistant and you are friendly and lovely and, you know, always happy to answer people's questions. Giving your AI a persona and a role to play and those kind of meta instructions on how you want it to respond really does influence the response and really will give you a much, much better experience of doing this. So let's take a look at a couple of examples here. I'm using the same documents I was using before. Those answers were coming back earlier with just the facts, all good, but you might want a bit more than that. So I've used something here that is actually one of the samples that Microsoft show on their website of how to do this as a starting point, but I've added a little bit more to it. Act as an assistant in the Human Resources Department, and you are knowledgeable about all of the policies in the department. You want to help people find the right answers. And then we're giving it some specific parameters around saying always greet users warmly and use a smiley emoji. This does get a bit much pretty quick, but just to show you something you can do, positive language, use emojis, exclamation marks. So look at the difference that makes when I go through and do that. Hello, smiley face. I'd be happy to help you. So we're now getting the same answer, but it's coming through with a much, much different tone and also still giving us those references in there. So then what happens is we can say, let's say I'm the manager this time, generate a single paragraph script which I can use for a conversation about a performance issue with my staff member. Now, this is where you want to think about that sort of custom instructions, because I've still got it there going, oh, you're friendly and smiley and using emojis, and this is not so great, right? Now I'm a manager and I mean, okay, of course, I'd be happy to help you with that. Here's a script you can use. So I asked it for a single paragraph and it's going on and on and on. And, you know, like again, the little kind of celebration emoji in the middle of something about a performance review, not so good. So what we're going to do now is change this and have a look at the difference in this custom instruction. So I'm going to come in here. Now I'm saying act as a senior HR advisor to the management team. you see the difference in tone here. I've taken the references to the emojis out to see what happens. Now, you can only have one of these custom instructions per Copilot. So if you've got something that's acting both for managers and for staff, you just want to find that moderate in between. But you might also want different Copilots for different types of uses and to sort of prompt it in this different way behind the scenes. Let's look at the difference here. This is much more appropriate, right? When addressing an issue with a staff member, it's speaking to me in that kind of much more managerial advisory type of tone in here. It's still going on and on. So the other thing that we can do with the custom instructions is to ask for a limit to how long it should be. Answers should be no more than 500 characters long. Please be brief. So let's try this again. Certainly a whole lot better. I did actually do a character count and it's more like 700, so it's not quite on the money, but you can use that custom prompt to actually the custom instruction, to really narrow it down to a certain length if you want the bot to be more brief. Have a play around with that. This is one of the most important ways and one of that you're going to get better results out of generative answers. The other thing that's really important about generative answers is prompting. Now this is tricky because this is on the user side, and getting users to understand how to prompt correctly is tricky. If you've got customers, kind of out of your control, but you might want to provide some suggestions or guidance alongside your Copilot. If it's internal, certainly sharing tips with each other about how this works is going to lead to a much better experience. So here's an example here, back to the earlier one where I'm coming in and I'm an employee this time, and I haven't asked it a question. Remember the reasons why we get the "I'm sorry, I can't help you with that." I've got a grievance with my manager. I feel like I'm being discriminated against. My manager ignores all my suggestions and talks over me in meetings. He does not do this with anyone else. What can I do? If you actually have a look at the policy about discrimination or the policy about grievances, it doesn't specifically mention being ignored or being talked over or those kinds of things. So it's simply just not finding the answer in there. So if you've got a use case where you want people to be able to do this kind of thing, you're going to need even more knowledge in there for it to refer to, or to train people that this is how you're going to do your prompts. So again, if I've put in something here, I need to complain about my manager showing discrimination against me, now it can do that. So again, with the smiley face, but I'm really not liking the smiley faces. I know people do love putting emojis in things though, so it's worth showing you that. So now we've actually got, it's working on the EEO policy, which is the Equal Employment Opportunity Policy, and it's finding those things and talking about grievances. So I didn't even need to use those specific words, but I needed to use a prompt that allowed it to find that, whereas the first one just didn't do that. So then the next thing you can do with the prompt, even though earlier when I said, create a single paragraph, it didn't go very well for me, the prompt, even without having it in the custom instructions, can actually give you something here where you can say, generate 3 to 5 bullet points. So you can ask it for a much more specific output. And you'll see here that it has actually come back with that. Generate 3 bullet points to prepare me for a meeting with my manager to discuss it. And here we go, 1, 2, 3, and we've got those things in there, which is actually a much better outcome than the great big long thing. And again, like we did earlier with the please summarize it for a child, please summarize the grievance policy for me in a way a 12-year-old could understand, and there we go. So just always remembering that this is not just search and finding facts, that this is actually able to do something much more sophisticated than that in rewording things. Give me bullet points on how I should approach this. Explain it to me in simpler language, and you're going to get that outcome. Now, it can handle multi-turn conversations. This one, a little bit limited so far. I'm hoping we'll see some improvement in this. It's certainly better than the last time I tried it. But let's say we've got an example here, back to the one we were looking at before, where I've asked it as the manager to say, please write out all of those things for me to help me with this conversation. And then I want to make it shorter. So I can come in here and say, please write it as a script for an in-person meeting. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to help with that. So again, it's not quite getting it. It is supposed to understand please write it as. I have seen examples where it can do that follow on, but asking it to please rewrite in that way doesn't really do it. However, what are the progress milestones I need to document? So this is one where we're talking about a performance improvement plan. And as I go through in the performance improvement plan, then it's got the thread of that conversation already from the earlier conversation, and I can just ask it it a follow-up question, and it's very successful at doing that. So if you want to get the most out of this, then these are the core things here to remember to get to the happy place. Understand where this RAG, this retrieval augmented generation concept, fits. What are those data sources that you're connecting to? What's the use case for it? Is it the fallback for the whole bot, or is it particular topics where you want it to be? Make sure you get those custom instructions right, play around with that, you'll get a lot more out of it. And if you are in that situation where you can help your users learn prompting, that is going to be a happy place too. If you need something that is less limited than all this, check out my video here on how to use Azure OpenAI with your data, and more content coming on generative actions, custom instructions. Let me know in the comments here what else you would like to learn. Plenty more to come on Copilot Studio. Thanks for watching.